In the news this week, Mark McGowan urged to examine water, electricity and household fees ahead of the state budget as the cost of living continues to spike. A WAMN News exclusive.
Also tonight, One Nation Senate candidate backs the idea of a parliament inquiry into petrol prices.
Calls for humanitarian aid to Ukraine continues as the conflict drags on.
Plus, a fresh look into the Royal Flying Doctor's super speed aircraft and Dr. Andrew Miller's comment.
This is The Evening News with Ivan Loom and Maliva Thorne.
Good evening. The push is on for Premier and Treasurer Mark McGowan to reduce water, electricity and household fees in the upcoming state budget as the cost of living in WA continues to skyrocket. The recent hike in other costs such as rent and petrol have triggered the opposition urging the McGowan government to carefully examine the increase on household costs. Liberal leader David Honey joined me exclusively to discuss these matters. David, thanks for joining us. Petrol prices are spiking and the cost of living are going sky high. Is it time for the McGowan government to cut water, electricity and household fees in the upcoming state budget?
Thanks very much, Ivan. Look, it's a really concerning time for a whole heap of, a whole lot of people in the community in relation to the cost of living. Cost of living, I can say before COVID struck, cost of living was the number one political issue. Obviously, since COVID's struck, then people are much more concerned about that. Look, I think it depends on who you are. And look, let's be frank. I'm a member of Parliament. I receive reasonable remuneration for my job. If the price of fuel goes up a bit, I can cope with that. But there are many people who really live, day to day and week to week, and they don't have a spare dollar. Now, we've got a state government. We've seen massive increases in utility charges under this government. Massive increases in water charges. In fact, all of the utilities, electricity. As well, and we've seen general increases across the board in other areas. So this is a government that's really milked the purse of the public of Western Australia.
Do you support the idea of actually cutting water, electricity and household fees in the next state budget?
Look, I tell you what, there's absolutely no excuse whatsoever for the government to increase fees and charges.
Do you support the idea?
Look, I think that there's a strong argument that they do need to do that for some of the utilities and really examine that. But as I say, I think for some people they can cope with the fees and charges that are there, but I think particularly for those people who are struggling, there's a really strong argument for the government to look favourably upon those people in terms of fees and charges. Let's be clear with the government utilities. Let's look at Western Power. Western Power, the state government are taking $500 million out of Western Power, $1 billion profit out of water users across the state every year. So, there's vast amounts of money going into government coffers above the cost of delivering the service. So certainly the 2%, I don't think there's any excuse for the state government's 2% budgeted increase in electricity and other utility charges.
Cutting prices are politically possible, but is there a will to do it?
Look, you'd have to. This government seems to be obsessed with increasing fees and charges. They've done that consistently in the last term of Parliament, and they've got them budgeted in again. We're seeing fees and charges increasing at double the current inflation rate. So, it clearly, and as I say, when these agencies are actually already making significant profits effectively from the people of Western Australia, it's hard to justify the increases.
David Honey, thanks for joining us this week.
My pleasure. Thanks, Al.
Petrol prices continue to spike as the Ukrainian conflict drags on. Questions have been raised as to whether an inquiry into petrol prices should be held at federal parliament. One Nation's WA Senate candidate Paul Filling supports the idea as people call for fuel excise to be reduced. Steve Anderson has this exclusive report.
One Nation WA Senate candidate Paul Filling supports the idea of a parliamentary inquiry into petrol prices after a record petrol price spike hitting almost $2.40 in Perth this week. Mr. Filling said that oil companies are in a unique and privileged position, with the market being relatively sparsely populated.
Have an inquiry into fuel pricing fuel availability, and of course the on costs of the so-called zero or net zero emissions and other green-based policies on simple things like providing a reasonable fuel price at the bowser.
This comes after Pauline Hanson has called for a halving of the fuel excise from 44 cents to 22 cents per litre. On top of saving directly at the pump, Mr. Filing said cutting the excise will relieve inflationary pressures as well as reducing the prices of goods. With the federal budget coming soon, this will have a significant impact on motorists, with 95% of the excise being reinvested into transport infrastructure. Motorists are expected to pay $49.3 billion over the next 4 years in fuel excise without any changes. With inflation, bare shelves and a shadow lockdown, the economic effects of COVID are long-lasting.
Here we are with government excise likely to be responsible for an increase in prices across the board.
Luke Derrick, WAMN News.
Perth rallies have continued in support of Ukraine as the country's conflict with Russia continues into a second week.
Concerns remain for the country, with the Ukrainian community standing together in calls for refugee visas and humanitarian aid as requests increase for military assistance to help end the war. Nelson Liu reports.
Joining together in solidarity as the conflict continues.
People around the world are standing with them.
Ukraine's battle against Russia has entered a second week, and Perth's Ukrainian community are rallying again for their home country.
They're wanting the Russians out of their country. That's what they want, and so they're prepared to come together at groups like this and rallies like this and call for that.
Calls are continuing for people's safety.
Well, as you heard, a lot of people saying their visas to come to Australia being turned around very quickly.
But help is needed on the ground in the Ukraine.
It's not humanitarian aid, it's not visas. They want ammunition. They want guns.
International assistance has been offered, with Poland providing fighter jets, but it's been stopped by NATO nations.
I'm afraid that it might escalate conflict. It is already escalated to that level where kids are being killed and buried.
They just want the suffering to end.
The West has to win this war, otherwise we have a crazy people in other countries trying to do the same.
Nelson Liu, WAMN News.
COVID continues to spike in the community as case numbers jumped over 5,000 this week. WA's top doctor Mark Duncan-Smith said an Omicron-specific booster is expected to be available later this year. He also stated the possibility of ongoing boosters as time progresses and the virus continues to spread around the world.
If you're due to get your booster, I strongly encourage you to get it, as it gives you 98% protection against severe disease. Omicron-specific boosters are being developed and will most likely be available later this year and may be used as potentially a further booster dose. As the virus becomes less severe and more infectious with the passage of time, it's anticipated that over the years, it will be required that people will need ongoing boosters similar to influenza.
This week on the WAMN Extra News Club, while facing some challenges in the market due to the rapidly spreading COVID outbreak in Western Australia, the Perth office market is looking on the bright side. In January, the office vacancy rate in Perth CBD reached its lowest point in 7 years, at just 15%. In 2022, however, the rate of office occupancy has dropped to 55%, a notable contrast to the last 2 years that saw around 75 to 80% office occupancy. According to the Property Council WA Executive Director Sandra Ruhr, the decline in office occupancy can be attributed to the growing COVID outbreak in WA causing more people to work from home, as well as the requirement to wear a mask in workplaces. The impact of this on small businesses in the Perth CBD that often depend on office workers' spending will be seen in the next few months.
It's because a lot of people depend on them, and really the multiplier effect of when people come to work, they get other things done during the day. So there might be a little bit of shopping, someone might need to go out and buy a birthday present for someone, or go to a beauty salon and, have a waxing treatment or something like that, buy some groceries, or even there might be a family birthday and everyone decides to go out for dinner in the city. All of those things really add up, and they add up quickly, so people don't feel like they're spending a lot, but it makes a big difference to the thousands of hospitality, retail, cafe businesses here in the cities.
You can read all that and more in the WMN Extra News Club. Subscribe in the link in the description to support independent journalism and more.
A group of independent Senate candidates pushing for better Indigenous and human rights in Australia gathered to campaign this weekend. The group consists of 6 candidates including Jerry Chachatos, Jennifer Kashingan, Mervyn Eads, Megan Cracker, Riyad I. Hakimi and Diane Logan, with the theme of leaving no one behind. Their campaign comes after the court ruling on the Kumajai Walker matter just before the weekend.
We want to tell our own lines, yes, and that's why we're getting behind Jerry Georgiadis and Megan Cracker to run for Senate. If they get in as senators, a lot of our Aboriginal issues and a lot of issues right across the board, black, white, and brown will be spoken about. The many issues: incarceration, housing, homelessness. A lot of the issues is not hit in the way it should be.
A female staff member has been injured in an attack at a Morley shopping centre car park. The 21-year-old victim followed a woman into the underground car park over a sales receipt for an item when the woman attacked her and ripped a necklace from the victim's throat. She received a broken nose, contusions and bruises to her face and body. WA police are investigating, and anyone with information is urged to contact Crime Stoppers.
A FIFO worker's push on mental health well-being has been honoured, with his portrait set to enter the Archibald Prize competition. Nigel Gold, the FIFO worker we featured late last year, continued his It's OK Not to Be OK campaign, receiving national media attention and commendation. The presentation of his portrait will be underway later this month to raise money for the Royal Flying Doctor Service. During an exclusive interview about his Perth event launch, Mr. Gold says stakeholders are listening and addressing FIFO's mental health concerns.
I feel all sides, unions, multinationals, governments have now woken up and the sleeping giants have risen. And I feel that these sleeping giants that were there, the old fossils like me who used to think it was socially accepted to work these hours, but no, times have changed and we're listening. The finish line is getting that simple message out there where people can communicate, they can talk, and the simple message, it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to get help. When society can say that, no matter where you come from, what you do, that's where the message is. And we'll never give in because we're Australians. We look after our mates, we look after our family, and we tell the truth.
So Ivan, what do you think about the artwork?
I just love it, especially some of the signs. The lower corner of the artwork. So you've got the work, W stands for the Workers' Unions, and then you have the MO, which stands for November, and my favourite, the Royal Flying Doctors.
Well, speaking of the Royal Flying Doctors, Nelson has more on that with Western Perspective.
Thanks, Ivan and Melly. Hello and welcome to Western Perspective. This week is a service making sure people across regional WA have access to healthcare and emergency life-saving treatment. WA's Royal Flying Doctor Service have been helping look after regional West Australians for 90 years, but now they're getting extra help with a new jet bolstering their capabilities. I spoke to CEO Rebecca Tompkinson about the part the new jet will play in regional healthcare.
It's a really important capacity addition for us as an organisation. We had our busiest year ever in 2021, doing more than 10,000 patient transfers. As we prepare for COVID-19 and the response the state needs, this additional jet adds extra capacity to our organisation at a time when it's going to be needed most.
So what are the features of this jet that make it an important addition?
Our new jet, the Rio Tinto Lifelight PC24, can take 3 stretchers instead of our standard 2, which means we can take 3 patients instead of 2. And more importantly, it will enable us to take 2 medical crews instead of our standard 1. And it puts time on our side. Time is a really precious commodity in regional areas, and this jet can halve the time it takes us to travel from Perth to Broome or from Perth to Esperance, putting time on the side of the patient.
With COVID affecting the regions, how important will this jet be in servicing that community?
This jet adds an additional strength to our service. We have brought on new frontline team members, more pilots, more doctors, more nurses, and new assets to ensure that we are able to increase our service capability and meet the demands of our services as they're needed.
With the need for doctors in the community, in the regional community in particular, how important will this be?
So our service works in partnership with Aboriginal Medical Services, with WA Country Health and with the broader health system. So being able to ensure that we've got that extra capacity means that we can add to all of our partnerships and all of the community organisations that we work with to ensure that we can meet the service needs of the patients in regional areas.
And how vital will that be?
That'll be incredibly important to all of our organisations. We're very proud to have partnered with Regional Western Australia for more than 90 years. Regional West Australians have always stood by us, and we will continue to ensure that we deliver the best possible service we can for them each and every day.
And now, here's AMA WA spokesman Dr. Andrew Miller with his weekly COVID-19 update and commentary.
Hi. Well, it's been an odd week in Western Australia as we reach thousands of cases per day at the same time as the rest of the country is dropping all of their remaining COVID restrictions, it seems, which is a bit out of whack with the idea that case numbers are on the rise around the world, and the effect of the booster vaccines overseas is shown to be waning, so that unfortunately we're also seeing things like hospitalisations and deaths on the rise in places like the UK and Denmark. The West Australian situation, I think, is very positive because we have such fresh and high levels of third dose vaccination. The Premier is exactly right about that. And that's standing us in very good stead, except, of course, in the school age groups, where we're seeing in the young ones who are not wearing masks, very high spread through those classes, and I'm sure you're all aware of people, if it hasn't affected you directly, who have the illness in their family. So our thoughts are with them, and we hope that this will be a fairly low peak, but know that we need to keep doing simple measures as time goes by. So can't do enough to encourage people to use good quality masks, N95, P2 masks, KF94 masks, the ones that seal well around your face, really do make a huge difference, especially if both people are wearing them when we're indoors in particular, because fresh air is the cure for this virus in terms of diluting it, getting rid of it, blowing it away like cigarette smoke. So I hope that we continue to see a fairly flat peak here over the next week, and as we're reaching that time that I think will be at about the top of the number of cases in Western Australia. And if we do get through with what is being predicted as relatively low cases, hospitalisations and deaths, then it will be a remarkable achievement, and one that Western Australians should be very, very proud of. I think that we're quite good at complying with the simple and relatively painless way of using masks. And remember that the Centre for Diseases Control advises that if you're in a situation where you don't have a huge supply of the high quality masks, it's not unreasonable to revert to using 5 masks one day each, and then rotate the masks as time goes by. It's obviously ideal to use a brand new mask every day, but for people who can't afford it, then if you have an unsoiled mask that's been undamaged, you don't wash them because that will damage them, but you can set them aside and use them again in 5 days' time quite safely. So check the American CDC website for details on that. Thanks again.
And that's WP for this week. We'll be back again next time, but for now, it's back to you, Ivan and Melly.
Thanks, Nelson. And here is Leo with what's coming up on 6 News tonight.
Thanks, guys. Today on 6 News, authorities warn that COVID cases in New South Wales could double within 6 weeks due to the Omicron BA2 subvariant. Plus, YouTube blocks access globally to channels associated with Russian state-funded media, including RT. And MP Dave Sharma denies mimicking an independent rival's colour scheme. You can see full details on those stories and plenty more by heading to our YouTube channel. Just search 6 News Australia to find us, or our website, 6newsau.com. For now, though, guys, it's back to you.
Thanks, Leo. And that's our weekly news and current affairs. We have the latest news on our website, wmnnews.com.au.
From Melly and myself, wish you good health, good night. See you next Sunday.
Thanks for watching.